in Buddhism, there are many different kinds of meditation. And so there I said, well, you could do one kind of practice or you could do another kind. That might not that might not feel very helpful, because we might have thought, well, what should I do? And that indicates something important about the structure of our psyche. That if there is a rule, you can either align yourself with the rule or resist the rule in some way, but you know where you are. When you have a choice, what shall I do? How would I decide? So this indicates moving beyond being either in control, as you can feel if you go along with the rule, or feeling out of control if either you don't know what the rule is or you find yourself in resistance to it, that the central point is collaboration, that we need to collaborate with ourselves, which means in the first instance you have to be able to listen to yourself. How is your body? How is your breathing? How are your emotions? And in relation to that, what's a good way of working with myself? We're working with circumstances which are both external and arising in relation to the patterning of our thoughts and feelings and so on. So if you begin with receptivity, you can start to get a clearer profiling of how you are in the moment, and then that gives you a sense of, well, this is what we're working with. Whereas if you start with a rule and you seek to impose the rule, that becomes a cover-up, because your energy is now being entrained into some formulaic structure which may be objectively good. No one's going to say it's not a good thing to focus on your breath and calm yourself, but it may not be particularly useful to you in the moment. So what we're concerned with here is, can I trust myself? Can I trust my own judgment? If I can't trust my judgment, I'm likely to want someone else to make the decision for me. So that's where patriarchy and rule structures are very helpful, because there's always somebody who's going to tell you what to do. And you hear the big person saying it, so you think, well, if I do that, I should be okay, because why would they want to lead me astray? But they don't precisely know where you are. So if the focus of our work is to be able to settle into the openness of our awareness and not get caught up in the habitual patternings which functionally can obscure the openness of that being, we need to trust that we have a capacity. Our capacity is diminished when we merge ourselves into these arising patterns, and our capacity is increased when we are able to observe the arising and passing of patterns without fusing into them. Why would we fuse into something? Because it gives a definitional shape. As we looked yesterday with the metaphor of the mirror itself has no internal shaping. It has no definitive content. But it's always showing patterns which have shape and color. It's easier to attend to the reflection. It's easier to do something with it than with the mirror itself, which you can't get. Or another traditional image would be the clear blue sky. If you look into the clear blue sky, it can be very relaxing, and you can do it as a practice of meditation to just open, but there's nothing much to say about it. Sky's open, sky's blue. But once the clouds arrive, you can say this cloud looks like an elephant, or this one looks like a bus, or this cloud's bigger than that. You can start holding on to the pattern of the cloud, the shape, and then you get into comparing and contrasting. So you have more stimuli for your narrative production on a cloudy day than on a clear blue sky day. And that's the same when our mind is relaxed and open. There's not much to say about it. But when you get caught up in your depressions, anxieties, hopes and fears and so on, then there's a lot that could be said. So relaxing into openness doesn't give you anything to hold on to. When you've got something to worry about, then there's something to chew on. You can get into it. You can have diverse opinions and views and tendencies inside yourself. You can make a proper meal of it. This gives you a sense of agency, which may be feeling powerful and able to clarify and construe what's going on, or your sense of agency may feel dispersed and dissolved and you feel a bit overwhelmed by what's going on, but you are existing in a dialogic movement. You're caught up in the familiar polarity of in control or out of control. And you can pass your whole life in that way. There's always something to be busy about. There's always something to think about. But as we started to look, the fantasy of agency that I, in my ego self, am the thinker of my thoughts is probably a delusion. So when we do that basic meditation of staying focused on the breath, we find that we succumb to thoughts. We intend to stay with a simple focus on the sensation of the breath on the nostrils, and yet we are carried off by a thought, by a sensation, a feeling. So where is the agency? It is as if the thought clasps our consciousness and carries it away. Then we wake up as if from a dream and we go back to the breath. We're not in charge of our mind. The ego seeks to have mastery, but actually doesn't have mastery. Generally speaking, in Buddhism, we could say the ego is an imposter. The ego is a false claimant to the throne. The ego claims to be the king or the queen. So who is the real ruler? One of the foundational Dzogchen texts is called the Kun-Pan, which means the king or the ruler who can do everything. This is not our ego's construct self. This is awareness. Because from awareness, the energy of the luminosity of the mind gives rise to this endlessly changing pattern of experience within which we participate. But this is a king who is, or a queen who is harmonious with the subjects, who's not in opposition. It's not about domination, it's about allowing patterns to arise and pass without editing. We edit because we want control. We want control because we're fearful of having to endure things we don't like, and we're hopeful of having more opportunities to enjoy the things we do like. And this fundamental bias leads to an insecurity because actually we don't know what's going to occur. We don't know what's going to arrive on our plate in life, and yet we have a whole set of prejudices and opinions and likes and dislikes. So how can I reconcile my personality, my sense of being me as an individual, which is actually grounded in the choices I make? I become my individual self by saying yes to some things and no to other things. So my ego self is actually a situation of prejudice. We go into a restaurant, we choose particular things from a menu. The people we're with choose other things. You go into a clothes shop, you choose some things, others. You go on a particular kind of holiday, some people go walking in the hills, other people lie on the beach. And through that, we create the patterning of ourselves. I know who I am because I've got some sense of the kind of choices I make, what I say yes to and what I say no to. As we started to look yesterday, the infinite nature of the mind, being without borders, means there is nothing outside it. Everything that arises is the quality or the luminescence or the generosity of the mind. And so everything has the same fundamental nature of being empty like the mind. When you look in the mirror, you can't find the mirror. The mirror is empty of self-substance, but it shows itself as reflections. Now, the reflections have appearance, but they are also empty of self-substance. So the emptiness of the mirror, if you like, is absolute. It's just empty. There's no inherent content at all to the mirror. But the reflections that arise in it also are empty of essence and substance. There is appearance which is inseparable from emptiness. Everything we experience, everything we think we know or have or do, is a luminous play of illusory phantoms. Now, clearly, if you're sitting an exam, whether you pass or fail has some importance to you. Because you want to go through one door and have one style of life, but maybe you find you can't go through that door and you've got to have another life. And this can feel like a disaster. Because you imagine you are in charge of the trajectory of your existence. This is probably a big mistake. Our life unfolds, our life is revealed to us. Today in Britain, some people will be in car crashes. And they'll be taken to an A&E department, and some radical surgery will occur, and when they leave the hospital, they'll be in a wheelchair. This sort of thing is happening every day, in which what are now called life-changing incidents occur. And people's situation is compromised. They have a stroke, and suddenly that healthy person who had absolute freedom is having to have someone else wipe their bum and survive the indignity of that, survive this transformed sense of identity. So who am I? I used to be like that, and now I'm like this. Who am I? So if your sense of self has been constructed entirely out of the patternings of your existence, and you've come to believe that these patternings give a true account of who you are, you're very much a hostage to fortune. Because at any time, something can blow across your life, and you find themselves in these estranged situations. When we see many people fleeing from the Middle East, and they're called refugees. Now, 10 years ago in Syria, these people were maybe school teachers or coppersmiths or bus drivers. They had a place to stay, they had friends, they had all kinds of structures. They were people in a milieu which was reflecting themselves. They existed as socially viable people who it would be difficult to subsume under one category. They had diverse aspects to their existence. Then this dreadful civil war breaks out, and so many people become refugees. And that's all you see. When you look at it in the television, you see there's a picture of people getting off a boat. Another 1,000 refugees have arrived in Greece. What do we know about these people? That they're refugees. So all the other aspects of their existence have been wiped away. That they have so many skills and qualities and properties, but these become irrelevant. They're simply stateless people who are now at the mercy of other people. most of these people have not been strongly implicated in pushing for political change. They haven't been out in the streets setting off bombs or trying to kill anyone. They find themselves suddenly caught up in this big wave, this huge wind that blows through their world, and everything's in tatters. And that can happen to any of us. All sorts of things can suddenly blow your life away. Parents die, children die, partners die or leave, all kind of sicknesses can arise. So it raises a central question. If identity is so fragile, is the only thing we can do to devote all our time to trying to shore it up, to trying to cobble together new ways of hanging in there and going on existing and doing our best under circumstances? I have to mobilize my resources. I'm not going to be crushed by this. I feel like shit, but anyway, I'm going to carry on. This heroic mode clearly has some value to it, but it's a little bit blind. Because if we start to see, oh, identity is very fragile, maybe I need a better house. We know the story of the 3 little piggies. Piggy number 1 loves playing in the sunshine and lives in a straw house because you can just get a little bit of straw and make a shelter. Piggy number 1 doesn't believe in winter. Piggy number 2 is not so sure and makes a little house out of twigs and branches. Bit more effort, but not so hard. Piggy number 3 is very concerned. So piggy number 3 goes into the forest, collects mushrooms, puts them in a wheelbarrow, takes them to the market, sells them, buys bricks, brings them home, and starts to build this brick house. I want to be safe. And as we know, when winter approaches, oh, there's something out there in the forest that smells piggy. So when the wolf comes, piggy number 1 gets very frightened. I'm in my house. Leave me alone. I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down. And that's what happens to all our lives. If you're living in a straw house, you are not safe. You are not safe. How do we get another house? And of course, this is a very instructive story because it says, when the wolf comes, you need a brick house. So generally speaking, in Asian thought still, they continue an analysis based on the 5 elements, just as we used to in medieval Europe. So we have earth, water, fire, wind, and air. And air as space, as the space of within which these other elements are. Earth is stable, water, fire, and wind are unstable, and space is stable in the sense that it has no substance or essence which can be undermined. So when the moving elements start to increase their dominance, as we will certainly see with climate change, the tendency is to find a way to resist this movement, to resist this move change by accentuating the earth element. So we need more rules, we need more immigration control, we need more protection in order to create barriers to stop the turbulence getting near us. That's like building a brick house. It takes a lot of effort, but brick houses also can get broken into. And a small brick house with 3 little piggies is going to stink after a while. So the more you compress yourself into an enclosed space, you lose a lot of freedom. So how do we deal with turbulence if we see the limitation of imposing rigidity? Well, in Dzogchen, we're concerned with space. The natural open spaciousness of the mind gives room for everything to move And because space doesn't offer resistance, there's no friction. And so the arising energy then releases itself. You know, when you see these weather forecast pictures of some big hurricane and it's moving across the water, and then it hits land in Florida or someplace. When it's moving across the water, you get waves getting bigger and bigger, but there's not much damage because the wave goes up and the wave goes down and the wind blows on. But as soon as it hits land, then the houses get destroyed, the trees get blown over, the cars are tumbled, and people's lives are in danger. So when movement is in space, there's the arising and the passing, the arising and the passing, because space is not defending itself against what occurs. Whereas around England now, there's a lot more attention paid to sea defences. And if you live in a house on a coastal edge in Suffolk, for example, you won't get any house insurance because you can see that the cliff, which is usually a sort of mud cliff, is just gradually falling into the sea, about 1 foot or 2 feet a year. Earth element looks strong and clear and solid, but is also at the mercy of moving forces. So in the meditation practice, we come to see that our sense of an ego self, definite knowledge about who I am, is actually an alignment with the earth element. You know, maybe we start as teenagers and we're kind of all over the place and we're not quite sure how we should live or what we should do. There's so many options and possibilities and we feel a bit dispersed and unformed. But as the years go by, we sort of settle into ourselves. We've got more sense of who we are. There's a sort of consolidation of identity, which has some advantages, but it doesn't remove the fundamental vulnerability. But the ego existing as a propositional state, we can say, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. And our attachment to certain patterns and the mobilization of our energy to the maintenance of these patterns seems to be what life's all about. That we need to find a way to hang on to a relationship, we need to find a way to hang on bringing up our kids so that they don't become too crazy, you need to hang on to a job so that you can pay the rent. A lot of our existence is passed in life maintenance, and that's quite a common term. Well, you would only need life maintenance if life was crumbling. If you've got a building like this one, you can see cracks on the outside, you can see that there's been little bits of leaking and so on. Buildings are under attack. Edifices are always under attack. And the edifice of my ego self is also going to be under attack due to the forces of aging, sickness, interpersonal difficulties, intrapsychic movements, and so on. Okay, so where do we go? You know, when you start thinking about all the problems on planet Earth, some people think, well, the solution is to get in a spaceship and go and start a colony on the moon or maybe even on Mars. We've got to get out of here. So, how do we get out of ourselves? Alcohol can help. But then you return to yourself, and it's usually a somewhat less pleasant self you have to wake up as. So, self-abandonment doesn't really do the business. How can I get out of myself? That's what meditation's for. It's not about getting out of yourself and going somewhere else. What it is getting out of the intoxicated feeling that I can have total knowledge about who I am, and my sense of self is the limit of my existence. Actually, we all have greater capacity than we're aware of. We limit ourselves by avoiding doing things that we might find challenging or difficult. And if we take the courage to step out, we find that our growing edge starts to expand and we can incorporate new elements into ourselves. So you might not feel very confident in singing, but you decide to join a choir, and then you start to believe in your breathing and that you can hear the tune better and you can participate. All sorts of steps people take out give them an increased sense of the border surfacing of themselves. If you do that, though, in heroic mode, there's a self-reflexive turn in that says, yes, I did it. And this, to me, disgusting narcissistic turn, which is pervasive in sport, this sort of triumphal, yes! What the fuck? This is shameful. As a good Scottish Protestant, I object. Because what it means is that there is a forgetfulness of all the environmental factors that have fed into the possibility of that moment arising. The victorious one, the heroic one, the one standing on the podium, it seems like an isolated monad, a truly autonomous person who out of themselves has achieved this great success. It's never like that. There are always teams of people behind, all sorts of people who are engaged in it. Because success and failure are pulsations in the kind of elastic rubber-like surface of the topology of the world. Whatever's going up means something's going down, and this pulsatory movement's going on all the time. So, again, we want to look, what is agency? That is to say, where do thoughts come from? Where do feelings come from? The simple answer is, they're my thoughts, I'm the thinker. They're my feelings, I'm the one that feels them, they're mine. And who are you? Well, I'm me. I'm me is like an earth element. It's like a wall which is set up to say, don't ask any more, enough's enough. I'm me, I'm just me, leave me alone, I'm me. What more do you want? You know me, I know me, I'm me. Done deal, full stop, leave it. This is a very strange invitation to stupidity. It says, the facticity of my existence, myself, cannot be inquired into. And of course it can't be inquired into because if I fundamentally put myself in doubt, I'm in a terrible situation. Once we have not knowing who we are, we get states described as depersonalization, anomie, alienation, and so on. And to be in a state where you don't have a felt sense of yourself makes ordinary life very difficult. So the fear, again, is in control or out of control. As long as I can keep telling myself I am who I say I am who I think I am, the show stays on the road. But if I don't know, if I start to get a bit confused, if I start to lose it and I'm not quite sure where I am, and I keep losing my keys and I think, I'm losing my mind, this becomes very, very troubling. Because I can no longer enjoy the assumption of the continuity of the pattern out of which I generate my sense of self. The bricks on my house are starting to crumble. So from the point of view of Dzogchen, this is a warning, this is a sense, a straw house, a twig house, a brick house. You don't need a house. All houses fall down. What you need is to be present with your mind itself. The mind, as we've been looking, is both openness and content. The mirror always has reflections. The content of the mind is the thoughts, feelings, sensations that we have. And they are the showing or the display or the radiance or the clarity of the illuminating power of awareness, awareness which is inseparable from emptiness. Emptiness here just means ungraspability. It doesn't mean nothing at all. Everything is unborn because it doesn't come into true existence, and yet the flow of appearance is ceaseless. So we have appearance without substance and emptiness, and this appearance is inseparable from the spaciousness of the mind. When you relax into the spaciousness of the mind, you find it's always the same. It's not the same on the basis of comparing and contrasting, in which you maybe look at an old photo of yourself and you think, oh, I still look a bit like that. That's me. I can recognize myself because this is like that. The sameness of awareness is that it always has the quality of relaxed, open, uncovered, fresh. It's just aware. Within it, patterning is ceaseless. Sometimes the patterning looks like subject, sometimes the patterning looks like object. We have the experience of, in a ballet or theatre or movies or painting or a novel, you fall into the object. You go into the other, or you're kissing someone or making love with them, and you, as it were, dissolve into them. The other, the object, becomes, as it were, the sight of yourself. The mind there looks like the object. Other times the mind feels like the subject. You appear to be in yourself, looking out, having thoughts and opinions about what's going on. These are both the play of the mind. When we say awareness, it's not a refined form of subjectivity. So, and this is quite an important point, and it's very, very difficult because language, we always hear at the limit of language, and so when we use language, language is, of course, highly associative. Individual words have no meaning. You know, as Wittgenstein says, if you want to know the meaning of a word, don't look up a dictionary. Talk to people and find out how they use the word. And this is the truth of it, isn't it? Because words display alterations in coloration and impact and so on as they arise in sentences in communication with other people. So we all have background notions of what a word like consciousness or awareness would mean. And we need to be a little bit careful that we're not importing our pre-existing associations with these words so that, oh yes, I know what this is. I know what awareness means. So for example, I could say, I'm sitting in the room and I'm aware of a tree outside the window. That's a reasonable thing to say. That's not what the word awareness means in Dzogchen. That sort of awareness would be a kind of mindfulness. Mindfulness is a tricky term too. The word for mindfulness in Tibetan is dramba, which also means memory. It means recollecting, gathering together. So when you're mindful, you recollect yourself, you gather yourself together. You might get a bit spaced out, or you're thinking of something else, or you're doing multitasking, and you think, oh, I need to get to the shops. That's an example of mindfulness. Something comes to mind and you give it attention and it disrupts what was there before. I see the tree. As we looked yesterday, I impute the tree, I create the tree with my own associations and identifications. So this is why the image of the mirror is very helpful. awareness doesn't take an object, and awareness is not a subject. So the mirror shows, say for example, you stand with a friend in front of a big mirror, and you're looking at your friend, but in a way that you can see the reflection as well. You're engaged in a conversation. Sometimes they're talking and you're the recipient. Sometimes you're the active one talking and they're listening to what you say. So you've got a kind of movement of subject and object between you. The mirror is showing all of that. The mirror has no bias to subject and object. It just shows. So that's what awareness means. It's like the sun, it's illumination, and this illumination is everywhere. As Portia says, the quality of mercy is not strained. It follows equally. On the good and the bad, it goes equally in all directions. So that's why, again, there's a lot of concern with equanimity. Because as soon as you have bias, you want more rain here and less rain there. More attention here, less attention there. This is the quality of subjective consciousness, in which you're allowing one thing to be important, to be figural, and you put other things into the background. And so you have this movement of items becoming important and then not being important. They're pulled towards you and then passed into the background. But awareness is just aware. It's just aware. It doesn't have opinions. It doesn't have desire. It doesn't make choices. It just shows. So we might actually translate awareness as showing or illumination. What does it illuminate? It illuminates the non-dual field or the integrated field of the interplay of subject and object. As we looked yesterday, when we do the practice, we have our eyes open. We've got a sense of what's around, and we've got a sense of our body. And in the practice, we're not thinking, I'm in here looking out there. But by relaxing, we start to see what I call out there is the arising of experiences. I'm not seeing things. That's already a second order identification and elaboration. But when you allow the facticity, when you're just receiving the arising, oh, this is happening, this is happening. And then you bring that same attention to your individual self, as you would start by thinking, oh, this is happening, this is happening. So I can feel my back, I can feel my hands moving, I feel my breath, I see the color of your sweater, I have a sense of the shape of the room. This is happening, as it were, out there as object. This is happening, as it were, inside as subject. But these two modalities have the same ontological status. They have the same validity, the facticity of their emergence. When we get into interactions, of course, we privilege one over the other, because there seems to be the continuity of ourselves. So at the end of the morning, we disperse, we go in different ways, some people in cars, some people on trains and planes and so on. Clearly, each of us has a particular embodied continuity which opens up new experiences. So you might say, well, being here with you is a temporary situation, but being here with me, this is something much more enduring. You, the object, are ever changing for me, but I, the subject, am the one who continues. Sort of going on being of me, as it might be described in psychoanalysis. But going on being is not a very helpful term, because actually you have going on being becoming. I don't know what I'm going to become when I'm sitting in the train. I might just look out the window, I might read something, it'll depend. What will it depend on? What's outside the window, how I feel, I don't know. That's becoming, isn't it? We become according to circumstances. So although I can say there is a continuity of myself, as we started to look yesterday, the thing which continues is the openness of myself, which allows the flow of becoming, and the meta-narrative, and this is me, and this is me, and this is me, and this is me. To be an individual self is to be a dog with an infinite bladder. You can piss on every lamppost in town. This is me, this is me, this is me. Wherever you go, you lift your leg and this is me, my life, this is what I do. And it's this kind of ownership or incorporation which is only possible because the I or the me or the myself is actually empty of content. So this is, in Buddhism, what's referred to as delusion. That I, as the dynamic, as the movement of my life, always have new content, and yet I reassure myself by a narrative that says, I'm always the same. I've always been me. But when I woke up in the morning, I had one particular feeling, and I clean my teeth, I have a pee, I go out and I have a coffee. In each of these situations, different things are arising. But they all happened to me. Now, there you get the earth element. I'm here, I am the owner, I am the one that this happens to. I continue as an identifiable entity. That's how it seems. But this is delusion, because actually, all of that has happened to me, or I did all of these things. That is only possible because the I is empty. We do so many things. How could we do all these things? Because as soon as one thing comes into your hand, it falls out of your hand, then the next thing, then the next thing, then the next thing. So we're filling and emptying all the time. If you didn't empty, you wouldn't be able to fill. If you got up in the morning and you think, I need a pee, you can spend the rest of the day in the toilet thinking, well, I need a pee, I need a pee, I need a pee. I've had a pee, but I need a pee, I need a pee. That would be one way to live. And there are people who do that. I have supervised a case of somebody who could only eat while sitting on the toilet. Now, that's getting pretty bad. Because you can, delusional structures of self, identifications that lead to anorexia, bulimia, self-cutting, and all the rest of it, obsessive-compulsive things, these are people being caught up in an idea, in which the idea becomes the determinant not just of activity, but of identity. I have to is not just I have to do it, but the I have to-ness is the shape of my existence. Get out of my way, I have to. And that's a dreadful, dreadful place to be. But if we observe ourselves, I am empty and full at the same time. It's because I'm empty that I can have a rich and wonderful life. I can look at the trees, I can walk out and see the light glistening on the plants, I can hear the birds, I can talk to people, I can make a cup of tea. All of these are arising and passing moments, none of which can become reliable and stable and act as a guarantor of the continuity of my identity. But they are here. And this is why in Dzogchen they're always talking about immediacy, that our world arises all of a piece in an instant. We don't build it up like painting by numbers. You come into this room and the room is here. You go out of the room and the world is there. Moment by moment, we are participating in the almost magical fully formedness of existence. This is becoming, this is becoming, this is becoming. And that is because being is empty and becoming is filling. And being and becoming are non-dual. These are the two aspects of our existence. We become as the dawning clarity of the entire situation in which we are. And then within that, we move in a particular way, making choices, more eye contact with one person or with another. We engage with people in different ways. And this is the particularity of our participation in the field of becoming. This has been going on since we were born. This is our life, our existence. So identity is like the skin that forms on coffee. Some people may like that skin. I'm not particularly partial to it. So what we want is the fresh coffee, the freshness of life. An American guy who grew his own maize, his own corn in the back garden, and he had it that he could cut the maize, peel it, get it in the boiling water in 10 seconds. So it would be really, really fresh and tender. In a sense, that's how we want life. We want to be here. If we're here, it's here. The world is very kind to us. If we're here, we're never alone. Something is always going on. But if we vanish into the labyrinth of the mind, into our memories and hopes and fears, you can end up in quite a lonely little place. It's lonely and abandoned because you're not here. Where have you gone? Here. There are forms of here that appear to be not here. But here is always here. This is why they talk of it as an illusion which becomes a delusion. That we hallucinate our depressions and anxieties and hopelessness because we don't know how to be with how our life is. Old age, sickness, death. If we live long enough, this will come to us all. We will lose our physical powers. We will lose relatives, friends. We will lose mobility. We will lose the sense of being useful, effective people. We will become useless. How beautiful. I don't have the correct quote in my mind, but in the Bible, when it says, consider the flowers of the field, what's it? They toil, they sow not, neither do they reap. Yet Solomon in all his glory is not adorned as the least of these. You know? Just being is enough. And as my mum got very old, I used to visit her a lot in this old folks' home. And you go into a room, it's all these old people, and they look up, everyone's smiling. And go around, shake everyone's hand. Oh, hello, hello. And they're not doing anything. But there they are. And then you could see that some people became very agitated. And they weren't just there, because they're thinking about the past. They're thinking about what they've lost. But it won't come back. So here you are. Awareness is not dependent on the quality of activity. For example, Rigzen Godem says in one of his short texts, he says, the mind is not created by the good deeds of the Buddha, and it's not contaminated or harmed or destroyed by the bad deeds of sentient beings. This is why the mind itself, the Buddha nature, is described as being Vajra, which means indestructible. Our awareness doesn't get better if we're doing beautiful things, and it doesn't get worse if we find ourselves caught up in selfishness or jealousy. Of course, the patterning of our becoming, our manifesting, our being with others, this will be changed. If you're in a bad mood and you've got a sour face, this is going to impact the people around you. This is the performativity of the patterning of our energy as it arises in interaction with others. But awareness itself is not touched by this. If you put something horrible in front of the mirror, it doesn't close down or run away. It just shows the horrible thing. Then you put some beautiful flowers in front of the mirror, it just shows that. The mirror is not improved by the beautiful flowers, nor diminished by the horrible object. The mirror just does what it does, which is reflecting what's there. That's really an important difference. Because if you relax in the practice and open to the flow of whatever is coming, the more you see this neutral, even-handed, unbiased awareness offers hospitality to all. There's no bouncers on the door. There's no dress code. There's no requirements to behave in any particular way. The mind tumbles as it tumbles, and I'm okay. Then you start to directly taste, I'm safe. Awareness will not be destroyed by what happens. But when you don't rest in that open awareness, when you are identifying with your self-construct, then it matters very much whether you're having happy thoughts or sad thoughts. So this is the kind of litmus test as to whether you're really relaxed and open, because stuff just keeps coming and going. Good luck to it. But if you get into reactivity, if you get into editing, trying to hang on to what you take to be a good thought, trying to get rid of what you take to be a bad thought, you then get into a hands-on situation. You're constantly trying to improve yourself and direct yourself, and that doesn't help. Now, this is an instruction for the meditation. It's not the instruction for how to get on with your family. You get on with your family by putting on a smile even if you don't feel too good, because you want to encourage the kids to get on with life, and you keep your problems a little bit hidden, and you might phone a friend and tell them about them. And that kind of editing of expression of how we relate to different people, that's compassion, that's relatedness, that's manifestation. But the mind itself is not affected. So in the tradition, they say that there are three aspects to the Buddha. There's the Dharmakaya, which is the mind of the Buddha, this open luminous awareness. The Sambhogakaya, which is the richness of the potential of the Buddha, that they can show many different forms and respond in different ways. And the Nirmanakaya, which is the precise manifestation into the world for the sake of others. And in the tradition it says the Dharmakaya is for yourself, and the other two forms are for other people. So the Dharmakaya is awakening to the nature of your own mind. That's for you. It's your mind. If you don't know who you are, you've got a problem. So realizing the Dharmakaya, or awakening to the actual nature of your awareness, that's very important. And once you get that, enough. Because the quality of awareness is satisfaction. It's not hungry or needy. And so the other two aspects are the richness of the range of our potential and our capacity to connect. And within that, our capacity to participate and offer and exhibit plasticity in order to get a close proximity and meeting with other people, both empathic attunement and physical attunement, is very, very much for the other. It's not for us. So there you have the inseparability of wisdom and compassion. Wisdom is awakening to how it actually is, what awareness is, not being caught up just in our own thoughts and constructs. And then once we're aware, we see more, and we see in a balanced way, and that allows us to see what might be done. And then you find yourself moving in a field with other people, not dominating, not being dominated, but moving forward and back in the pulsations of connectivity. Which means that your agenda is to stay in contact. Contact is the most important thing in life. When we break contact with other people, our mind doesn't stop. We start thinking about other people. And when you think about other people, you develop representations of them inside yourself. Psychoanalytic thought now is referred to as object relations, or we have these new tendencies of mentalization and so on. And these are all ways in which we consider the importance of developing an image about other people. And in order to be a professional person, for example, to be a psychotherapist, you have to be able to give a good account of other people. Usually you have to write some kind of case study to get through the end of your course, and you have to come to supervision and talk about the patient. From the point of view of Dzogchen, this is an abomination and a disgrace. Because when you're in the room with someone, there is the vitality of contact. And the stories you tell about the person, what is that? We know the difference between food and shit. Case studies are shit. Because they're gestures of power. I know who you are, I can define who you are. But who is the one who's being defined? They're off out playing with their kids in the park. Mary is a this, that, and the other, da-da-da, 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 da-da-da. These are stories about stories about stories about stories. The vitality is ungraspable. When you have real contact with another person, the story is not very important. When you don't have much contact with a person, stories are very important. So, would you like to tell me about yourself? And the person starts blethering about this and that. And my mum was like that. My dad was like, I'm starting to get the picture. He's a person. You're getting a picture. The picture's not the person. A photo of someone's not a person. If you're with the person, you don't get a picture of them. You're just with them. This is so important because we live in a time of incredible objectification, the appropriation of images of people. When I was in Macclesfield, I was up at the big church and I walked down the little pathway. I was looking at the buildings and I looked in the window and it said, "You are on CCTV." And I walked down again, "You are on CCTV." Why? Why am I on camera? You didn't. If you had a notice at the beginning of the stairs, you're going to be on camera, get out my lippy and do my hair. Somebody somewhere has an image of me looking in the shop window. Do they need that? What's that for? Oh, in case you break in. So our images are being caught all the time, and these then become statements about us. And it's exactly that. If we can hear that, this is about me, but I'm me. So there you've got the fresh and the stale. And if you substitute the stale for the fresh, you've got a problem. You've got a problem. The stale covers the fresh. Once you're fixated on ideas about people and you build up images of them, your relation with them is going to be mediated through these constructs. Now, the help of that is that it's like looking at the clouds. Oh, there's an elephant, there's a bus. You can get your hands on something. But when you're in immediate contact with it, it's like the blue sky. You're just kind of relating and you feel a bit fresh and light. And you don't need anything to take away. Children understand this absolutely. They're out there playing 3-4 hours to come into the house. What were you doing? We were playing. What were you doing? We were just playing. Leave me alone. What do you want? A story about playing? When did you last play? Children cannot comprehend that adults don't know how to play. because we want to know what we're doing and we want to know why we're doing it. So the function in the meditation practice is always to relax and allow the movement of events to go without entering into your commentarial self. The ego, or our individual consciousness, exists as a commentator, elaborating storylines, having opinions, judgments, trying to intervene and organize the flow of experience. So when we do the practice, we just, as yesterday, we do the 3 we open, and stuff's going on. Now, at first you might think, well, I don't know what this is. I'm just sitting in the room and got my usual thoughts and start to feel a bit bored. I'm a bit of a plonker. What is this? These are thoughts. If you follow the thought, you start thinking about what you're doing here. That is definitely not meditation. But without trying to get rid of the critical or embarrassed thought, just allow it to be there. And it dissolves. Then something else comes. Then something else comes. The key issue is not to come to conclusions. Every full stop needs to become a comma. Whenever you sum someone up, whenever you define people, they're like that, and you just put a wee tail on that full stop. For me, when I last saw them, as far as I can tell, the world gets much softer, doesn't it? Because you've now made your definite statement about that person into something relational. They're horrible, which is to say, I don't like them, but I used to like them. Maybe I'm involved in not liking them. And once you start linking all of these things together, it's impossible to sum someone up. This is the movement from totalization to infinity. The ego's discourse is totalizing, because we want to be able to define someone, put them in a box, come to a conclusion, done and dusted. I know where I am. This is the certainty of the earth element. Now, if we just tilt that slightly and move into spaciousness, we're absolutely here, and we experience the other person is changing. They are dynamic patterns of unfolding, and we also are dynamic patterns of unfolding. So how will I behave? How will I know what to do? You don't have to know what to do. You just keep your eyes open and your ears open, and you watch the person's face and you listen to what they're saying. And funnily enough, words will start to come out of your mouth. That's how it works. But once you have created the anxious separation and you've turned the other person's existence into a problem or a puzzle that you're trying to solve, then it becomes much more difficult. So that's why we need to look at the secondary gain of the busyness of the mind. When we're in problem-solving mode, when we're mobilizing our knowledge and skills and so on, functionally this is part of our belonging, our being in the world with others, and it can be very helpful as long as it's a very clean transaction. The clean transaction is we experience someone in a particular state and we respond to that particular state, and then we leave it. There's no doggy bag, there's nothing to take home. We don't go and say, oh, I was talking with Mary today, she's very upset, I'm not sure why. Because now an image is being presented of Mary as being somebody who is upset. Mary may not be upset. Mary may have displayed this to you because she trusts you, and now she's feeling better because of your interaction. She's not feeling upset at all. But the image of Mary as upset is being transferred across. When we talk about people in that way, we have the secondary gain of a self-reflexive move that not only was I talking with Mary, that is to say, something is unfolding between us, but I was talking to Mary. Mary told me this, And this is consolidating, confirming the particular definition of myself and my importance. And I can now take my story about Mary and give it to someone else. So what I've done is used a transient interaction as a way of stabilizing a sense of my own value. And that is very difficult. So this is not even a conscious self-reflective movement. It's self-reflective, reflexive in the sense that it's a kind of invisible confirmation that I'm me because I did this or I said that. And this is one of the big problems in meditation, because it's the subtle quality of the commentator. It's the basis of the internal conversation in which, by keeping an eye on what we do, by observing ourselves in process, we feed into the narrative of who we are. Now, we want to follow the middle way, neither just unconsciously merged in what we're doing, so we're just lost, somebody gabbling on without any intent or purpose, or on the other hand, holding ourselves back and observing what's going on and preparing our responses as a tactician, thinking about how can I increase my gain. The middle way is being present in the moment, responding in different ways to different people, and it's gone, and it's gone, and it's gone. And this means equality and differentiation are not contradictory. That is to say, if we want to bring the practice into the world, everybody is entitled to our full attention, our full availability. But how we respond to different individuals will be different. So we receive people equally. This is, if you like, equal opportunities. I'm open to having a sense of everyone, to allow the particularities of a person's formation in the moment to register. But how I respond will be haute couture. It will be prepared just for you, and just for you, and just for you. So we don't give everyone the same deal. Everybody gets their own deal because the deal is arising in dependent origination. This is the co-emergence of the patterning of connectivity. But that doesn't mean that if we spend more time talking with one person and less with another, that's a sign that we like that person more. It's just, this is what's emerging in the moment. Sometimes we talk with people a lot, sometimes we talk with people not very much. That will depend. But what the meta-commentary comes in, it's much more interesting for me to talk with that person. Now you've got a conclusion. I like that person. So whenever I can, I'm going to try and sit next to that person so I can have this kind of conversation. And in that way, this person is becoming figural and everyone else is going into the background. And this is now being firmed up. I'm now coming to a definite conclusion. And what I'm doing, which seems to be taking care of myself, but what I'm actually doing is limiting my world, because I'm cutting myself off from interaction with people with whom it's maybe more difficult. That's where the growing is. That's where the life is. That's where I can see the X-ray of my own limitation. Because if I always follow the path that's easy, it's just more of the same and more of the same, and this is getting more and more constrained. So, receiving other people, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. Maybe you have to say that. It could even be honest and say, sometimes I find it difficult to talk with you. I don't know what to say. That's actually quite honest, quite connective. And then it could potentially open up a conversation. But if you avoid the person because you're not sure how to behave, then you go into this narrowness. So the Buddhist idea of compassion is to really receive the world, receive each situation as it is, in all its finesse, particularities, in this moment, without building up a big picture of it, and then responding to that. And on another day, you might have a different response and a different response. And you do what you can. And the key thing is to let go of the judge hovering above, giving you a scorecard. Well, you didn't do that very well. The reason is not that you should just be recklessly doing whatever you want with regard to other people. It's that if you go into observing yourself in the process, if you develop a kind of internal supervisor, what you're doing is you've now got a split screen. So you've now got one eye on the other person and one eye on the person there. Mm-hmm. And that's very difficult. I was, last weekend, I was supervising some Gestalt therapy in Poland. And so usually Gestalt therapists are pretty connective. So these people were extremely connective and very vital and alive. But I don't speak Polish. So I'm sitting there with this translator next to me who's telling me what they're saying. And she's doing simultaneous translation. So I'm looking at people who are giving me lots of eye contact and physical movement and hearing this at the same time, trying to jig this kind of correspondence. It's incredibly difficult. You know, that's the split screen. You know, if you're going to be there, you've got to be there. So one of the reasons we monitor what we're doing is that we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust the freshness or the spontaneity of our connectivity. And partly that's because we fucked up in the past. We've got caught up in impulses, in habit formations, in which we've dumped particular patterns or constructs onto other people. We've recruited them into the audience, into being the audience of our neurosis. And so that has been a kind of entrapment. A bit like in the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. We fix someone with our beady eye and then blether on and give them our story. And that is a gift of death. Whereas being fresh with people is the gift of life. And that's what we can try to do. Okay, we'll take a break now and come back and do some more practice.